Hello and welcome to today's Influence Stories. This has been a very difficult week for everybody in Miami-Dade. We've had a terrible tragedy happen right in our backyard with the Surfside building collapse, where around 150 people are still missing, and rescue efforts have been halted due to the um, unsafety and unsecurity of the debris. And today, joining us to discuss this issue is Al Brizuela, and he is a civil engineer here in Miami-Dade County, renowned, has worked in several projects, and I am very honored that you were able to make the time to meet with me today. Thank you so much, Al.
Thank you very much.
Al, like I said, it's been a very difficult week. The latest news that we have today is this morning, early in this morning, relief efforts or rescue efforts have been halted due to how unsafe the structure is, not just the amount of the debris, but also there, I believe, two towers are still standing, and those have there is noticeable shift in movement in some of the columns, and it could just come crashing down on our rescue workers. So
Yeah.
let's talk about what's going on right now. Talk to me about that.
Yes. Um, let's talk about that. The you need the building to support the building adjacent to it, and you need the slab which collapsed the pool deck to be able to save some of the columns down at the bottom. So at the end of the day, that building is in very precarious states, and it needs to be brought down, and it's going to be imploded in the next few days.
Yes, my understanding is that there are some news, breaking news, right as we were talking, chatting right before this interview, that the governor is concerned about the safety of our rescue workers, and that perhaps that is exactly what they're going to do to be able to safely implode it in a controlled manner instead of waiting for it to just kind of fall apart. And how would that work?
Well, they're going to take some columns out with explosion, and they're going to let the weight of the building fall in a particular direction. It's going to come down in the direction of the debris.
So they're going to be able to control which way it falls. That
Yeah,
is really the goal here.
correct.
Um, what if they don't implode it? What would happen?
The building's going to fall either this week or next week or the following week. The building will fall.
And that it would be a very unsafe situation. There's hundreds of workers, of rescue workers from all around the world, not just all around the country, but all around the world working on this issue. Now, let's talk about what you, with your experience, what do you believe occurred and how did we get to this point? I know it is difficult. You didn't work on that project, but as an engineer who has worked in South Florida for a long time, what would be your idea as to what happened? What is your opinion, your professional opinion as an expert?
Well, my assessment is, first of all, that building wasn't built very well from the beginning. Back in the day in 1980, when the building was built, there was an economy that had 18% interest rates, and a construction loan from a developer to build a building like that would have been a burden. So whoever built that building had to build it fast and cheap, and that's not a good combination.
Mm.
So we start from that point forward. Building was built fast and cheap, and then after that, a building of that type would require a significant amount of maintenance, and we all know that maintenance wasn't performed very well in that building. Time goes,
Mhm.
and then in addition to that, it was discovered later that the slab for the pool deck, the slab for the pool deck was not did not drain. It basically was flat. It collected water. So it collected water for 40 years. And the water would have permeated the deck and gotten into the rebar below the slab. Now, this building, it consists of two levels of parking deck, um, which are reinforced concrete, and then from the parking, the top of the parking deck, which is a pool deck, it goes up with the tower. The columns from the tower extend into the parking deck and down into the foundations. The foundations are pile foundations. They go to the rock below about 40 feet. That was done appropriately. Now, when a pool deck collects water for 40 years, there's going to be a lot of corrosion in the slab. And one of the videos, the video that was taken of the through the gate that led to the bottom of the part of the deck, showed there was like a waterfall inside the deck,
Just minutes.
inside the garage, right? There
Just
was a
minutes before this was I just want to clear for everybody that's watching, this was that TikTok video, that social media video that like one of the neighbors took just minutes before the whole building collapsed, and it showed, just like you said, in the parking garage, a waterfall, just water just falling, I mean just straight out of the roof in the parking garage,
correct,
under the pool deck.
correct. And then there was some news of that came out. There was a woman that lived in the unit that called her husband in Washington. I guess he was a lobbyist. I don't know her name. And she mentioned to her husband that the deck had fallen. The pool deck had fallen. She saw a hole before the building fell. She saw a hole in the pool deck. Now, when that pool deck fell, which is a slab that supports the structure of the building, that created a big problem for the structure, and it fell right in the middle between the two buildings. The pool deck fell, is based on the description, right adjacent to the first part of the building that fell, and it fell right up against the building. Now, what we know about columns, the columns have to be supported, and an analogy that I can give to your audience is that, say for example, I take a straw, and a very long straw, and I put pressure on the top of the straw. That straw is going to buckle. It's going to fail, and it's going to fail by buckling. And as engineers, we want to brace the columns, which are like straws, so they don't buckle. The bracing are the slabs. So we have a design column from 10 feet or whatever the floor to floor distance was in that building, and it's designed for that. If the column were any longer, it would be problematic, because what we get is a slenderness problem at the unit. When we lost the slab, the columns up against the buildings didn't have the required support, and they failed.
Mm-hmm.
They became twice as long, basically. They were X long. We lost the slab. They became twice as long.
Oh, okay.
And when we see the video of the building falling, it was falling from the edge of the pool deck back. So that's the first part of the building that fell. What we have at that point is a domino effect of the building collapsing, and then the adjacent building needed the building adjacent to fall. So the genesis of the collapse of the building is the falling of the pool deck, eliminating the support to the columns, allowing the columns to buckle, and then the building fall.
So it was a domino effect. One thing led to another. Now, how could this possibly happen? This is like we were discussing, I believe, and please feel free to all of our listeners here in the comments, tell me if I'm wrong, but I think this is the first time that we have had anything of this magnitude occur in the United States without it being caused, for example, by a terrorist attack. We have had buildings collapse, as we all know, but they were caused by an explosion, a terrorist attack, something along those lines. There have been other collapses in construction sites that are of smaller scale, also tragic, but smaller scale, never an entire two buildings Um, and with this magnitude of loss of life, how how could something like this happen right here in Miami-Dade County? How could it go from how could it have passed all of its inspections? How could this water that was hanging out there for 40 years have been ignored? How could something like this occur?
Well, visual inspections are problematic, and we had a lack of maintenance for 40 years. And this building was up against the water. It's on Miami Beach. It's up at the ocean, and it had the effects of salt and water on the building for 40 years. So buildings on the beach will require much more maintenance than, for example, a building in Kendall.
Hmm. Correct.
So water and salts are going to corrode steel. The steel is not visible, and corroded steel loses its property. Corrosion, if for example, if you had corrosion on a car or whatever, it flakes off. It's no longer something that is strong. So steel will eventually corrode away. And that's what's happening for 40 years. It doesn't take 40 years for a rebar to fully corrode. So there would have been areas in that building where there really was no rebar, no reinforcement, no steel.
Mm. So none at all holding up this massive structure that was eaten away between the water and the salt water, because once I suppose it's being eaten away, cracks open up and more salt in the air can get in. I would guess.
Correct. The salt, first of all, concrete's porous, right? Concrete's going to let water travel through it. Um, the concrete, as it lets water in, it attacks the rebar. The rebar is going to corrode, and especially on the area of the slab that was flat, water was there in a condition that was pooling, and what was perfect for permeability in through the concrete.
Now, the county as going to start working, Miami-Dade County is going to start working with cities and municipalities within the county to start inspecting all of these buildings that are 40 years or older. That's been one of the things that Mayor Daniela Levine Cava has already said. Do you think that perhaps we're going to be looking at maybe a whole year of a bunch of buildings that may become unsafe, may be deemed unsafe? What do you think that these inspections can actually be done? Because you just told me visual inspection is very difficult. Is there a way to actually inspect them correctly?
Sure. There's a lot of equipment these days. There's ultrasonic equipment that can look inside concrete, can determine the strength of the concrete and determine the strength of the rebar. So my recommendation is don't wait 40 years. The 40-year recertification is a staple of our inspection process, but here it didn't work. It was 40 years. They were working on the recertification. The building fell. So if we're going to rely on 40-year certifications to keep buildings safe, we know that doesn't work.
Especially on the beach side, like you
Uh,
said.
Correct.
And
Yes, on the beach side. So we need to establish a new methodology for inspections, and not one as large as broad as a 40-year recertification. We need to focus on specifically um, on the structure.
right, exactly. So also, after Hurricane Andrew, there were changes in the way that construction has to be done. There was changes to the code in Florida. Do you foresee this causing a legislative change, a code change throughout the state, um, possibly even the country? I mean, this has turned into not only national news, but international news. Again, because of the magnitude and that we've never seen anything like this. We could expect something like this to happen in perhaps third world countries where buildings are not maintained. But here in the United States, and this was, although not an incredibly luxurious, compared to some of the new buildings that are going up, was seaside living, and therefore there were condos there that were in the $1 million. So, do you think that perhaps, like you said, you have some ideas about how new inspection should be done, that this should cause a legislative change?
Well, it has to really start in the condo. And I don't know if you live in a condo. I live in a condo.
No, we don't.
The condominium association environment is very um, difficult. For example, if you're going to pass, for example, in a building like that, and you have people that are on fixed income, and you have to pass a special assessment to be able to fix the building, and there's a certain amount of people that don't want to pay that extra cost, it becomes difficult to do that. And it's
Yes,
not
in
going to.
fact, some of the information that's coming out is that they had been given a price tag of upwards of $15 million to do the repairs. Perhaps because, as you mentioned, this building was originally not built properly. I mean, all of the information that's coming out says that there was a problem that was inherent in the actual building of the building, and that they were aware of this, and that it would take more than 50, at least 15 or $16 million. And the association was locked up in just this battle that you were talking about, because they would have had to do a very hefty special assessment. And this could be coming to a condo near you in
Oh,
Florida.
exactly. But the problem with that is there are no consequences. You can just not do anything. There are no consequences. People didn't know that there was going to be a collapse. There hasn't been a collapse. There are no consequences.
Mhm.
So now, what the legislature or Miami-Dade or whoever has to do, they have to create a situation that has consequences for the board to act. And the consequences could be, for example, I my thoughts would be that probably we need to start inspecting these buildings after 10 years of construction, and just for the structure, and inspect maybe 10% of the buildings in the county or up in the various counties. You're going to establish Miami-Dade first. Establish 10% of the buildings inspected per year, and have a pool of engineers that are on a lottery system that basically the building doesn't select its own engineer. It's randomly selected, so there's no collusion in the process. Oh, you're my friend, help me out, give me a better inspection. So
Mm.
a randomized inspection by a random engineer. The county builds the condo pays the county pays the engineer, and there's a report generated. And that report will establish whether the building is safe or not. And if it's not safe, then the board has to act within a certain period of time. If not, the fire department comes in and moves all the tenants out, and the building loses a certificate of occupancy.
Mhm.
That would be a constant. And then the county has done that on 40-year recertifications. Some buildings are so bad that the county has come in and moved people out with the fire department. So that's happened. So we can certainly do that, and that would put teeth, and that would give the people in condos would then have to pay attention.
Yes, definitely. Consequences are the only thing that get people moving. Now, going back to the stability of the search site, um, there have been, and of course, I cannot imagine the agony and the anguish of these family members who are waiting for news of their loved ones who were sleeping soundly at 1:30 in the morning when this building collapsed. But there have been, the search has definitely been slow and arduous and difficult. There has been rain, incredible rain in South Florida, like we haven't seen in a long time, followed by extreme heat. And now we possibly have a tropical storm coming our way. And this building is so unstable that now that they're going to have to knock the rest of it down. So, as an engineer, how much instability and how do you think that affects the search efforts in the site?
Well, at a certain point in time, there's people can only live so long,
Correct.
and that
They were saying 8 to 10 days,
after
unfortunately.
8 to 10 days, I don't believe it's going to matter what we do.
Mhm.
And then it's just a matter of removing the rubble and finding the bodies. Um, so that's unfortunate. but it's dangerous for the people, the rescue workers, to have a unstable building right over their head. We could create a situation that that building kills them.
Yes, that would
So
be
we've got to
tragedy
fix
upon
that problem.
tragedy.
That would be another tragedy. It'd be stupid. So we need to get that building safe, which means take it down.
And additionally, I mean, we know a rescue worker that fell more than 20 feet. There was a fire deep within the rubble. There was, you know, jagged edges and just generally unstable where it could just cave in on itself. And I just want to say that, I have immense respect for all of the rescue workers that are working hour after hour after hour through the night. That we owe them to keep them as safe as possible.
Absolutely,
So
absolutely.
I do hope that the authorities take this into account, and of course, I'm sure they will, especially now that we know that the other buildings are so unstable.
Correct.
Well, Al, thank you so much. If anybody wants to reach out to his firm, I'm showing the website right here, Brizuela Engineering, and you can find out information right there about all of the work that they do. I thank you so much for your time. I know that you are going to be active in possibly, coming up with new legislation, and I do hope that engineers everywhere work hard on this because you guys are the experts. You are who we need to listen to.
Absolutely. Let's make sure that something happens, and if we do it the right way, there won't be any a future tragedy. Absolutely.
God willing, God willing. Thank you so much, Al, for your time. And thank you for everyone that watched. Our hearts are with the families and the friends of those that were in the tragedy. And of course, we support all of our first responders during this very difficult rescue effort. Thank you so much, everyone. And thank you for joining us.